Who's ready to learn my language? Woo! All right. So I'm not sure how many of you saw my last presentation, so I'll just give you a brief background as to who I am. My name is Jonty Yamisha. I am an ethnic Circassian, and I am a speaker of the Circassian language. But I was not always. At the tender age of 31 is when I decided to teach myself this language. Did not learn it as a child. My mom and dad both speak it fluently. It's their first language. But did not have the opportunity to really learn it effectively as a child, although I always heard it somewhere in the background. So at the tender age of 31, I decided to teach myself this language. Now, before we get into this, and I'm actually going to teach all of you this language today. All of you will speak Circassian today. Took me 10 years. It's going to take you about 10 minutes. So let me give you a brief background as to what it took for me to figure all this stuff out. So Circassian is spoken by about 2 million people. That's the best estimate that we have. I believe that that number will drop to 1 million over the next 20 or 30 years as the elders, like my father, depart this world. And as children, my children being an exception, cease to be taught this language. So it's not quite at the level of endangeredness as some other languages. Thanks to the legacy of Soviet philology, we actually do have quite a number of documentations of the language, albeit somewhat incomplete, albeit also in Russian, which is a language that's still new to me. But the challenge we have is that there's really no well-created materials that are used for this language to be learned by a non-native speaker. There are readers, there is some basic literature, but it assumes that you are familiar with Cyrillic. It also assumes that you have access to native speakers in your household, and that Circassian is spoken over the kitchen table. So, super brief summary. What did I do? I spent about a year learning the alphabet, and I'll show you the alphabet in just a minute. It took me a year. I think that's actually pretty good given how complex the alphabet is. Then, not knowing much about applied linguistics or neurolinguistics or word frequency or sight words or any of the stuff that we all know about today, and kind of pre-Google, I compiled high-frequency word lists and got up to about 2,500 words. I then sat down with my father over the course of 6 months, and I said to my dad, I need you to translate all of these words for me into Circassian. Now, the challenge is my father does not read or write Circassian. So what did he do? He wrote every single one of these words in the Arabic script phonetically. And English is not a strong language for him, so he consulted a dictionary, an Arabic dictionary. This is how convoluted this whole process is. He consulted an Arabic dictionary to look up the meanings of all these words. Then I would sit down with my father, and I would transcribe these words into the proper Cyrillic alphabet of Circassian, understanding there are, I'm not sure if you could call it some tones, but there are some sounds in the language that are very difficult to make out. So for example, in my dialect of Circassian, we have sh, sh, s. Okay? And then in the K sounds, we have k, 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 kwa, 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 kwa. All right? So the word sh means milk. It also means bullet. It also means to lead. It's a homonym. But the word sh means to sell, right? But the word s means to know. The word sin means to do. So I'd ask my dad, is that sh or s or s, right? So that was an interesting 6 months. I then spent about a year memorizing every single one of these words. So 2 years into this odyssey, I thought, hey, I know 2,500 words. That's enough for, it's enough to be dangerous. Let me open up a book and see what I can do. Well, I ran into a simple problem. Let me show you a word in Circassian. I'm going to back up so you can see the entire word. So what I later found out is that Circassian is a polysynthetic language. So and some of you may not know what that means. If anybody who studied Turkish, you know I always screw up this word. It's an agglutinative language. Agglutinative language. So they glue phonemes on top of each other. A polysynthetic language is like an agglutinative language on steroids because we have less vowels. So Circassian, my dialect of Circassian has 56 letters. Of those 56 letters, 2 are vowels. Maybe 3, depends on what you believe about the IPA transcription of them. And we actually have words that don't have vowels, like det, which is the brother of a female. Doesn't exist in my friend Mariette's language, dialect. So this word up here is وقصد Couldn't you help me? It's very, it was like, по-русски это вы можете мне помочь? So couldn't you help me? But this is how we would say it normally. So it is a polysynthetic language. What does that mean? And I'm going somewhere with this, I promise. W, you, w, you. W, qiz, in my direction, w, qiz. Can you, in my direction, the apok, to help? Can you, in my direction, help? If, couldn't you? Do you have the ability? Do you have the capacity? Do you have the knowledge to be able to? Could you, in my direction, help, have the ability, capacity, able to? Inu, in the future. In the future, para. I just threw that in to make it a little bit longer. You don't have to say para. But para means, couldn't you? All right, so all together, para. You will never find this word in a dictionary because it is a synthesized word in a polysynthetic language. So when I sat down to open up these little books, these little children's books, now this is actually not even a complicated word. Children would say this. Okay, my son, Mama, right? I mean, it's not all this, but it's enough of this. You're not going to find these in a dictionary. So crestfallen, right? I had to deconstruct what the polysynthetic constructions of the language were. But I got through all that, and I have figured out how to learn this language well enough that people sometimes think I grew up speaking it. Native speakers are shocked when I tell them that I didn't start learning it till I was 30. Other people are shocked when they hear that this is what I speak to my children in, even when I'm sitting down with them to do their homework from an American school. And that's who I am. And I'm going to teach you how to speak this language here today. So I'm going to zoom through a couple of slides so we can get to some of the good stuff. This is all the output of the NASIP Foundation. This is a nonprofit, federally recognized foundation, a not-for-profit corporation in the United States, recognized as such. I started this about 10 years ago. We are here to preserve, protect, and promote Circassian language, history, and culture. We do so at the inclusion, not the exclusion of other languages, right? So I'm not a nationalist, I'm a patriot. I love my culture, I want to share it with the world. I don't think it's better than any other culture or language. I just think it's mine, and I want to share it. So let's talk a little bit about where Circassian is spoken. So Circassians are historically from the North Caucasus of the Russian Federation. And if you're thinking geographically about where we're from, we are north of the Georgian border on the southern frontier of the present Russian Federation. We are just west, the Circassian semi-autonomous republics are just west of what you would call Chechnya in English, and just east of Sochi. There are nominally about 900,000 Circassians who live in the entire Russian Federation. Probably about 700,000 of these Circassians live in the North Caucasus. The other 100,000 live mostly in Moscow and other regions within the Russian Federation. At least that's according to the most recent census data. Geographically, depending on who you talk to and who you believe and what your definition of a Circassian is, there are probably somewhere between 3 to 5 million Circassians around the world. Now, why do I say it depends on who you believe and what your definition is? Well, if your dad's Circassian, but your mom's not Circassian, you're probably Circassian. But what if it's the other way around? What if your grandmother was Circassian? What if you were adopted by a Circassian? So, you know, we still have this, in my view, primitive view of genetic bloodline. And there's other cultures that define things differently. So if you're an Arab, if you speak Arabic, right? Most Circassians don't speak Circassian, so we can't use that definition. But, you know, somewhere between 3 to 5 million of us globally, just shy of 1 million of us within the Russian Federation, probably around 2, maybe 2.5 million in Turkey, then a couple 100,000 in the Middle East, I was born and raised in the United States. There's probably somewhere between 8,000 or 10,000 of us in the United States. And none of my numbers add up because, like I said, these are all ranges. So let's talk a little bit about Circassian morphology. And I'm not a believer in formal instruction of grammar, but a lot of people are fascinated by Circassian grammar. I get emails all the time about it. So I'm just going to give you guys a bird's eye view. Circassian is very rich in consonants and very poor within vowels. I think, you know, seeing up here, we've got 1, 2, 3, well, technically 1, 2. We've got 2 vowels in there. They're repeated a few times, but of all the letters you see up there, we've only got 2 vowels. There is, however, a very melodic flow to Circassian, similar to Turkish, where there is vowel harmony, and very dissimilar to Russian, where there's no real pattern. Typically speaking, the stress on any word that you say in Circassian will fall on the penultimate syllable, so the second to last syllable. So bottom line, I'm not a formal linguist. In fact, when I read grammars, I'm very good at math, very poor at proofs. I'm very good at languages, very bad at grammar. So when I read this stuff, it doesn't really set in. After 4 or 5 sentences, you're gonna develop an ear for it, and it'll get pretty simple for you guys to figure out where to place stress. Circassian has 4 grammatical cases: the nominative, the ergative, the instrumental, and the adverbial. Of these, the one that's probably the most unique is going to be the ergative case. Michael Campbell gave this great presentation about the ergative case and subject, object, and that flies past my head. I've read so many descriptions of what an ergative case is, what ergative languages are. It makes no sense to me at all. But I do know that it's proper to say bzerquesh instead of bzemquesh, which is an example of ergativity within the Circassian language. So Google ergative, because I'm not qualified to explain it to you. And I'm also going to make reference in this bird's eye view before we really start speaking Circassian. I'm going to make reference to something that really helped me to learn the language and that also helped me to teach the language. I've taught Circassian to conservatively about 1,000 people in person. I ran a Sunday school at the Circassian Benevolent Association in New Jersey for several years, and I taught people literally from the ages of 5 to 55. Now, at the age of 5, these kids, there was a presentation earlier today, I created coloring books for these kids, right? Literally, I sat down, and one of the issues with minority languages is, and we have an inferiority complex. You know, we're not the dominant language, so we must not be as great as the dominant people. We are inferior to the dominant people. And so it's great to create materials for kids and adults who want to learn, but the reality is you're competing with everything that Disney has to offer and everything that's available on Amazon. So if your stuff looks hokey pokey, the kids are going to pick up on it real fast and they're not going to want to use it. So we created coloring books, we created flashcards, we created activity books, fill in the blank, connect the dots, all the things that you can imagine, going all the way up to adult lectures for adults. That sounded weird when adult lectures. It's not what you guys thought. Lectures for adults and everything in between. And when I say adults and saying up to 55, that includes people who are completely fluent in the language but illiterate in the language, right? And the opposite, people who can read and write Cyrillic but can't speak Circassian. So about 1,000 people in person and probably 4,000 or 5,000 people remotely, people who have used my materials, emailed me. I have a Facebook group of about 5,000 members. And the verb conjugation table is something that's really helped me to understand the language, because Circassian has this very unique characteristic that I never thought about until a good friend of mine and a very well-known linguist in this field for Caucasian languages, Professor John Colarusso out of Canada, he said, you guys are so stubborn, even your language shows how stubborn you are. I said, all right, so what do you mean by that? He said, well, you'll have a sentence that says something, and then all the instructions of that sentence are repeated again in your verb. I'm like, well, give me an example of that. He goes, well, mobjerquesses. So what am I saying there? Go close that door. Mo is that thing over there, all right? Hueshes is a verb construction similar to the ones up here that I'll show you in just a minute. Huesh means to close. Hueshish means to close again. So the entire sentence says, please close the door, but the verb says, please close the door. That's a very simple example, but that's how our verb construction works. And what I learned very early on is if you could understand how verb construction works, you've got 80% of the battle won. The other thing I realized is that as hard and complicated as it is to be able to understand or look up polysynthetic words within a dictionary, once you get a few word roots down, it actually becomes remarkably simple to be able to understand what you're reading. We have professionally produced dictionaries in our homeland. They don't have more than 30,000 words. And at first I thought, well, we're a poor language. We're not a literary language. We don't have all these words. And what I realized is because we're a polysynthetic language, is never going to appear in that dictionary. So we're not a poor language. The other notable thing here is we lack true prepositions. We have a handful of prepositions, but we lack true prepositions. So instead of saying, sit down, next to me, next to me, there's no word for next to me. We would say, okay, so that bra is a prefix, and again, I'll show you this in just a minute on the blackboard, the green board. This bra is a preposition, it's a prepositional prefix that shows you that you are sitting next to me. So on the one hand, you could then argue, I have to learn 12 verbs for every action because there's like 12 different directions I could do. On the other hand, I could equally argue, you learn 500 verbs and 12 prefixes, and you can say 6,000 types of verbs. So let me go back over to the board and show you an example of this. By the way, Michael, polysynthetic word, no, I just, because I know you're interested in this stuff, so I'm just, for your, two vowels repeated, polysynthetic word written as one word. Never find it in a dictionary. Part of my challenge in teaching myself this language, seeing words like this in written text and not being able to look them up. So before we really go through the verb conjugation tables, let me show you an example of what I'm talking about here. Quan, and don't worry about repeating. We'll get to that, but don't feel the urge here. Quan means to go, right? But then I add this little prefix into it. Quan means to come. Why? Because you're coming, you're doing something in my direction, you're coming in my direction, you are coming to me, right? Yaraqwan, okay? Now, ya makes it transitive. Ra also makes it transitive. I've never figured this stuff out. Yaraqwan means you're sending someone, okay? But we can also add suffixes. So, kwajin means to return. This jin means you are coming, but in the opposite direction. It doesn't necessarily relate to the speaker of the language, like kakwan does, but you're returning. Kakwajin now means you're returning to me, or you're returning in general. Yerakwajin, send him back, or send it back, right? So lots of verb constructions that are like this. And the verb, they're actually not verb, well, I guess they kind of are verb conjugation tables, but they're verb tables. So this is something that really helped me to deconstruct the language, learn it for myself, teach it to others. And it's interesting because I have found a handful of similar tables produced independently by other Circassian language activists who are not me. So apparently there's a method to the madness here. But let me show you. So this is the word sa'un. Sa'un means to see. Sa is a very interesting sound in our language. Sa'un. Sa'un. The way this sound is typically made, I'm not a native speaker. My parents do this on both sides of their tongue. What they do is they take their tongue, they push it to the top of their palate, and they force air on the sides. I just do it on the one side. This sound, I'm told, also exists in Gaelic. So, sa'un, to see. So now we go through the personal pronouns. Sa is I or me. Wa is you plural. Ar, just like Turkish, is a woke pronoun, right? He, she, it doesn't matter. It's a woke pronoun, right? Da is us or we. Fa is you plural. There is no polite. It's just plural, right? Akhir is them. Then you go, and then you have a prefix that you put in front, and this again, like John Colarusso said, I'm duplicating all the information in my verb structure. So I see, I don't say sa shao, I say sa so shao. And so shao is written as one word, but sa is written as a separate word. Sasotao. I see. Sasotao. I see. Wo-wo-tao. Wo-wo-tao. You see. Ar-yatao. He, she, or it sees. Da-do-tao. Fa-fo-tao. Ahar-yatao. So that's all in the present tense. Past and future tense, and there are other tenses, they're super simple and they're all regular. If you want to put anything in the past, you say sesislawash or wowaslawash, and now the little prefixes become a lot, the prefixes become a lot simpler. And to put anything in the future, shawonush. Okay, so we do have two other verb tenses. There's a distant past and a distant future. So I can say sesislawat. I put a T in there instead of ush. I saw in the distant past. Sesislawanut. I'll see it in the distant future. There's also other prefixes, like up here in this example, that little if. It's a subjunctive tense, basically. It's a modifier for subjunctive tense. But this is effectively how verbs work. But they don't all use these same prefixes. So they're all fairly regular, but they don't all use the same prefixes. So you can see here, psathen, to talk. And now you can see, and I'm just going to zip through these, sasopsatha, woopsatha, armopsatha, dadopsatha, fofopsatha, achermopsatha, sesepsathash, sesepsathanos, woopsathash, woopsathanos, dadopsathash, dadopsathanos, fofopsathash, fofopsathanos. And then there's actually an error in my table because I was tired last night when I produced this. So that's a bird's eye view into how verb construction works. And it effectively, verbs, they duplicate most of the information in our sentences. This is one last one. Sa jzoa. Sa jzoa. Wa jboa. Arjea. Da jdoa. Fa jvoa. Achrjaa. And then here's what's interesting. So talk about polysynthetic construction. Maybe in this sentence beast of a word up here, maybe I would see the apukwa and I think, oh, help, the apukun. Or I'd see a word that I kind of knew and I could look it up in a dictionary. That's all well and fine because the word root is actually quite large. Look at the word root in j'en when I put things into the past or the future tense. It's that we call it plotka in Russian or bash in Circassian. It's just a stick, it's a glottal stop. So the entire word root of j'en gets compressed down into So sometimes it can be fiendishly difficult to figure out what word roots are present within the words that you're trying to deconstruct. So I'm going to breeze through this. I'm going to show you guys what the alphabet looks like, because I think a lot of you have asked, what does the Circassian alphabet look like? First, it's notable to understand there are two dialects of Circassian. There is the Western dialect and there is the Eastern dialect. My friend, Mariette Parnok, was here earlier today. She had to catch her plane back to Tokyo. And she's been living in Tokyo. She's lived in Tokyo for 11 years. But to me, she's a Westerner because she's a Western Circassian. And she always gets a kick out of it because she said, it's the first time in my life that I'm in Japan and somebody's calling me a Westerner in a different way, But I'm the Easterner here. So there's two dialects. What we're going to go through is the Kabardian dialect. There's a few sounds that my dialect has that the Western does not, and vice versa. The other thing is on some official alphabet maps, yo in the official Russian alphabet is present, and others it's not. The reason for that is there is a way to write yo using our alphabet. Using the E with two dots over it is really exclusively used for loan words. So when I first started teaching children in our Sunday school how to learn this language, I thought, hey, I'll make it pretty and fun and interesting and put vocabulary stuff on this and I'll produce this. And this is actually done in PowerPoint because my day job, I work for big companies. I'm not a linguist or anything. This is all done in PowerPoint and there's a lot of letters up there, right? And if you want, let's just go through this together real quick, okay? Now, it's important to realize this is not which is a different sound. It's okay? Gaz. goose. Again, not with a glottal stop, with a half glottal stop in the beginning, but n, I, b, baja, v, okay, g. So up until now, it's the same as the Russian standard Cyrillic alphabet, but now we run into a very interesting letter, gu. And we already see, they did the best they could, I guess, but we already see a disconnect in that g is g, but we don't say hu, we say gu. Right? So we're already a little bit confused, but guess what? We got another wild letter coming up. It's r. And then the last one is ru. So I'm not going to go through the whole thing because I'm not sure we're going to have time. It did take me a year to learn this originally. But the other thing you'll notice, we've got d, j, z, we've got ye, yo, we've got zh, z, we've got z. Then we've got this yi, and then we've got the K letters. Oh my God, look at this. We've got k, and you thought I was faking before, didn't you? Right? I'm making it up. Ka, kwa, kwa. No. Ka, kwa, ka, kwa, ka, kwa, ka, kwa. Oh my God, I'm going to have a heart attack. Then we have these L letters. La, sha, sh. And by the way, sh is blood, sh is man. Sh, right? Then we go back to standard Russian Cyrillic. Then we've got this P, P, but we've also got P. Right? Then we go on, we got t, we got f, then we have these X letters, like X-Men, right? H, 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 then we've got these like SH sounding letters, sh, sh, s, s. Oh, I forgot the ts and ts. Then we've got the and u. So this gets real complicated real fast. It gets real intimidating real fast. So what I did was I broke this down and I broke it back down and said, here's the upper and the lowercase. And then I said, let me organize these into categories that you might actually know to simplify it. What I do, forget group 5. What I did first is I say, look, and I think somebody said before, they want to learn Russian, but Cyrillic is really intimidating to them. Well, the reality is, I think Cyrillic's like 28 or 30 letters, the standard Russian Cyrillic. You already know 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them, right? A, M, O, S, T. These are the same in both Latin-based or English and in Cyrillic. Then you've got the second group of letters that look like English, but they sound different. V, Y, N, R, U, H. Then you've got this other that look different, but they actually have English sounds. A, B, G, D, J, Z, Y, Y, L, R. Yeah, R, F, H, I, Ya. Then you've got this other group where the sounds are still resident within English, but you need 2 letters in English to make it, right? Z, J, C, Ch, Sh, and Sh. And Sh and Sh, a lot of people will complain to me, oh, why do we, whether it's learning Circassian or Russian, why is it that we have Sh and we have S? Why, you know, this is so confusing to me. Well, we have this in English too, but it's even more complicated. Everybody stick up your thumb, right? This is the, say it, thumb. This is our thumb. Now let's point it at them. Are we pointing our thumb at them, or are we pointing our thumb at them? You can all hear it, right? So the reality is, sh and s are not so complicated. At least they have different letters. Th and the are 2 letters, and they're spelled the same, even though they're pronounced differently. Right? So this mystical alphabet is not quite as complicated as you may think it might be. And then the reality is, this group 5, you don't need to learn these at all. If you learn that the w, which is a letter all by itself, comes after a few other consonants, if you know w and you know g, you know gu, right? And anybody who studied Russian knows makiznak. They know that the softener will soften a sound. Well, we have a hardener. So g becomes g, right? So if you learn that there's a glottal stop, that there's a softener, there's a hardener, you actually can read effectively without learning all this garbage over in group number 5. So when I teach this to people who want to learn Circassian, the reality is I'm giving them about 30 letters. So I take 56 letters, I drop it down to about 30, and the reality is 6 of them are already known, and the others are not as exotic as they may seem. So that's a bird's eye view into the alphabet. So now let's actually start learning the language. What I realized after many years of trial and error is that I was using comprehensible input. And that's why I was successful in learning, and that's why others were successful in learning. So this is an example of my teaching materials that I've used successfully in the past. We're going to use this here today. I'll walk you all through it. And I have commercialized my materials for a variety of other languages, and people have asked, why, how did you do that? A couple years ago, I got a message on Facebook from an ethnic Circassian who all my materials are available online for free, who used all of my materials to learn Turkish. And I thought, how the heck did you learn Turkish from my materials? Well, he said, well, I downloaded all your stuff, and I threw away the English and the Circassian, and I butted up the Arabic and the Turkish, and I used that to learn everything. Because my materials have 3,000 sentences that include 1,500 phrases and 4,000 high-frequency words. So he learned Turkish well enough to get out of a refugee camp and get a job. And that's when I said, hey, yeah, I've taught a couple thousand people how to learn Circassian, but maybe I can commercialize this and not spend so much money on my nonprofit organization. So anyways, let's kind of walk through this. So we're going to do a dialogue. At the top of the dialogue, repeat after me. Dawshit. Jonty. So that's my name in Circassian. Dawshit. Dawshit Jonty. So dawa literally means how. So in later versions, I provide gloss translations. Once I learned what gloss translations are, here you can, and then I do provide the decomposed vocabulary to the right. Dawa literally means how, right? That's as simple as that. Washit is a polysynthetic verb construction. It means you stand. So dawashit actually means how do you stand? Okay, so psori zaosu dawashit Jonty. Okay, now the next word is a little bit of a doozy. It's also a polysynthetic construction. Sikharzinnash. So before you start, kharzinna. Kharzinna. It means to be well, okay? There's a prefix in front of this, s. It means I am doing well. And then a unique characteristic of my dialect of Circassian, anytime you're answering in the affirmative, and this is not to be confused with putting a verb into the future tense, anytime you're answering in the affirmative, you put us at the end of what your statement is. So the first response is Sikharzinnash, I am well. S. Kharzinna. Kharzinnash. Sikharzinnash. I am well. Sikharzinnash. Okay. Now we go to the next sentence in this little dialogue. Same line. Wawitsar tambi. Wa. You. We. Your. Tsar. Name. In the nominative case, not the ergative case. That's what the Tsa is name. Tsar is nominative case. Tambi is a name. Okay? So again, here we're repeating everything we say. You, your name is Tambi. You, your. I don't know why we do this, but we do. So, Wawitsar. Wawitsar Tambi. Dawashit. Kharzinnash. Wawitsar Tambi. Hawa. Hawa. So what do you guys think Sasitsar means? My name is. Wawitsar, your name is. Sasitsar, my name is. There's no, similar to Russian, we don't use we do have a verb to be. We actually have two verbs to be, similar to Spanish, I believe. But we don't use them they're not used as auxiliary verbs. So there is a word, shatin, which means to exist or to stand, and hun, which means to come into existence. But we just literally say, you, your name is, or my name is here. So, Hawa, Sasitsar, Aslansh. Aslan. Very common name, means lion as well, but it's also a very common name. Okay. Dana. Dana. Where? Dana Tambi. Where's Tambi? Or literally, where Tambi? Whoopsara. 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 Psa. R. Wapsara. Do you know? Do you know? It literally means, do you know? Tambi. Wunam. Shas. So this is where it gets interesting. I was talking to Marietta about this earlier. Us means to be inside of something that is enclosed on all four sides. We have it's similar to verbs of motion in Russian. We have so many verbs that mean to be someplace, and the verb changes on whether that place is an open area, is enclosed on 2 sides, 3 sides, has a roof, does not have a roof. You can, for example, yitin means to be inside of something that has an open top. Shitin means to be on top of something in an open environment. Shasin means to be inside of something that's fully enclosed. Khatin means to be in an open area space. So we've got all these interesting verbs that mean to be someplace. Tambi wunam shas. So shasin, and then we add this at the end to show that you're answering in the affirmative. So, kura. I believe. I believe. Tambi's at home, I believe. Tambi's inside the house, I believe. Tambi, wunnam, shas, sogura. I believe Tambi is at home. Now we get into a very interesting verb here. We all know Tambi, right? That's the first word on the second to last line here. Now this next word, ptsuhura. So we have this traditional P, Cyrillic P. Then we have this shortened ts. Okay? Tsuhun. Tsuh is actually a human being. In Circassian, tsuh is a human being. Tsuhun is to be acquainted to a person, to know a person. We wouldn't say to know a person using the word know, like knowledge. We would say to be acquainted to. And then we put this prefix to show that I'm talking to you in a question format. I've got verb conjugation tables that are more complex than what you saw before to show all this stuff. And again, this goes back to how the verbs contain all the information that the sentence is designed to convey. Tambi ptsuhura. Do you know Tambi? Are you acquainted with Tambi? Do you know who Tambi is? These are all equivalent translations. Anta? Anta? It means yes. I think I've read that like most languages, no, or the word for no, niet, no, nein, it always has an N in it. Our yes starts with an N sound, so we're contrarians, I guess. Anta? Ar? Sasi? Ar is he, she, it. We know Tambi is a boy, so ar, he. Sasi, nibzels. Nibzels. He is my friend. He is my friend, okay? So we go through all this construction together, and again, comprehensible input. One of the things that I realized early on is I'm not a linguist. I don't have formal grammatical training. So to get around all this complexity of past tense, future tense, present, progressive, stuff that not knowledgeable about, I started creating all these little diagrams, right? So I used, and because I was getting a lot of my stuff translated into other languages by volunteers, I tried to avoid the complexity of using words like present tense or past tense because I feared they may not be translated in the way I wanted them to be translated as we were going into different languages, especially since English, Arabic, Turkish, Russian fell off the page, but those are completely different language families, right? So the word negation, I didn't even use that. You can see here, positive sign, negative sign. Wakharzina. Wakharzina. Are you well? And then to answer in the affirmative, anta se kharzinas. Anta se kharzinas. Now, to negate the verb, hawa. No. Hawa. Sakharzinaqam. So this is it's like a qaf in Arabic. Qim. Qim. This is how we negate. Qim. Kharzina. Qim. Kharzinaqam. Sakharzinaqam. I am not well. Right? Wawitsar tambi. Nta, sa, sitsar, tambis. Yes, my name is Tambi. Hawa, araqam, sa sitsar. So you can negate verbs, but it's also equally okay to negate pronouns. So in this second construction, and this is how a native speaker would typically say it, hawa means no, araqam, ara is that thing over there, that one, right? Because remember, ar is he, she, it. So when I say ara, it's that thing over there. Araqam, that is not sasitsar, my name. You would not really, I can't think of a different way you would negate this. So this is maybe a little bit of an irregular construction. But that's how a native speaker would say it. That's how I say it. And then the final one, arwi nibzal. Nibzal. Friend. Nibzal. And actually, this goes back to even beyond the polysynthetic construction of Circassian. Once you dive into word roots that are not words all by themselves that can then be polysynthesized into new constructions, it becomes even easier to understand how the language is structured. So nibz is actually age. Okay, so we could say dapsui nibz, how old are you? That's kind of street language, but you would say that. Nibz means age. Au is the time of. So a friend is somebody who's in the time of your age. It's your peer, right? So that's how you would deconstruct that noun there. And then to make it negative, hawa. Ar sinabzawqum. Okay. And then again at the bottom, just different shatin, san, shasin, gupsasen, tsahun. Shatin is to be, it's to be or to stand, right? It can mean both of those things. San is to know. Shasin is to be inside of something that's enclosed in all four, a cube type thing, 6 directions. Gupsasen is to believe or to think, and tsahun is to know or be acquainted with another person. And so this is kind of an example of all the input materials that I've used. And then to kind of further deconstruct it, this is a different view of the verb conjugation tables. This is before I figured out how to do the verb conjugation tables, where I tried to show, how do I show you the natural organic construction of the language, but decompose it in such a way that you can actually look at what the prefixes, the affixes, the suffixes are. And this is just one of those examples. And again, part of the intent here, understanding that all of my materials would be translated by volunteers, is to use diagrams. IKEA was my role model here, right? IKEA knows that more pictures equals less words, equals less complexity, less cost, more understanding. And again, I didn't know what comprehensible input was at the time of this construction, but that's what this all came down to. And then started building, these are from study notes in real classroom environments. So, mirchet, or chetmir, who is this? Who is this? Chetmir. Chetmicher. So if anybody speaks Turkish, this is like on versus onlar, right? We just add sh or shar. Sitmir, that's the second one. Sitmicher. And then we have a word that also means what, but it means what for an abstract object. So sit is a non-abstract object, something you can touch. O, hard to say. O is for an abstract object. So you could say, younger speakers would say sit akhwar, which would mean like what happened, but people like my dad would say okhwar, what happened, because the thing that happened is not tangible yet, right? So again, just more examples, but I think you guys have a good sense of how this is all set up, and some of the examples that I use to try to get rid of the complexity of formal grammatical instruction or the need to translate stuff. Do you guys want to dive in and just kind of talk to each other and practice the language? Yeah? Okay. So I want everybody to find somebody close to them because I want us to try to pair off a little bit. Okay? So I want you to turn to the person that's your partner. Dawa. Dawa was shit. Dawa was shit. The other person will shorten it and make it just kind of vernacular language. Kharzinas. Kharzinas. Dawashit. Kharzinas. Dawashit. Kharzinas. Now, the person who said kharzina, we all know, how are you? I'm fine, right? Now, the person who said I'm fine, say, whoopso. Thank you. Okay, so the actual thing that we'd want to say here, the full thing would be tamwirapso. Don't worry, you don't have to say it. Tamwirapso just gets shortened to, which actually means God grant you life. Tamwirapso, we just say whoopso, which literally means you live. But we say it as thank you. Okay, so the first person, dawashit. The second person, kharzinish whoopso. Dawashit. Kharzinish whoopso. Now I want you guys to switch. The person who said kharzinish whoopso, you are going to start with dawashit. Let's start over. Dawashit. Kharzinish whoopso. What does dawa mean? How? How do we say you stand? Yes. What? How do we say thank you? How do we say well? Who's doing well? How are you doing? Fakharzina. Sarisa kharzinas. Dawashit. Okay, now I'm going to go one by one. Dawashit. Answer me. Dawashit. 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 Wa kharzina. I tricked you. Just say inta. Inta means yes. So I'm going to throw some curveballs. Inta means yes. Hawa means no. Okay? So I'm going to mix it up a little bit. Dawashit. No, just dawashit. Kharzinash. Dawashit. Wa kharzina. Wa kharzina. Inta. Inta. Kharzinash. Mash'ar kharzinash. So this is the methodology that I use. It's lots of comprehensible input, deconstructed dialogues, and then lots of drilling. Lots and lots and lots of drilling. How do you say yes? How do you say yes? Doesn't drilling work? How do you say no? All right. You guys can all speak Circassian. Congratulations. So the question is whether Circassian is connected to Wabuch or Abkhazian. The answer is yes. Linguistically, Circassian is a language isolate. It evolved from Proto-Circassian, and nobody knows what was there before Proto-Circassian. And then the branches it broke off into are Abkhaz, Wabuch, and Circassian. And then Circassian has two other dialects, Western dialect, which is called Adiyen, and Eastern dialect, which is called Qabarde. Wabuch died off. Abkhazian still exists. Abkhazian is mutually unintelligible to Circassian. I know this because I have family in Abkhazia. However, the grammar construction is identical. In fact, I've seen them use verb conjugation tables very similar to mine, and it's very easy for me to understand how they're all constructed. The major difference is that they have masculinity and femininity within their nouns. We don't.
During the first part of the talk, you were talking about when you sat down with your dad and he looked up things in Arabic. Is that because
he wanted to know what the English word was? He wasn't always certain of what the actual English word was, so he looked it up in Arabic so he could map it to Circassian in his brain.
But there's no connection between Arabic script
No.
and Circassian?
No. Circassian has been written in the Arabic script in the past, but presently there's no connection between the two.
Okay.
But he was an Arabic.
He is an Arabic speaker. He was Circassian. He spoke Circassian exclusively until he was roughly a teenager, but he grew up in a village in Syria where they had to use Arabic for school and tests and stuff like that.
About how long does it take for people to go through your material?
How well do you want to master the material? How long does it take to push through an Asamil book?
So would you say it's comparable to an Assamil book?
I would say I have produced a formal grammar. The formal grammar is about 120 pages long. You could read it in a few hours. I've got loads of, if I were to add up all the unique PowerPoint slides I have to learn this language, there's probably 200 of them. And that's the end of the time that I have. Thank you very much. If anybody has any other questions, just come up. I'm happy to answer them. Thank you.